So picture this. The Civil War is over. And for millions of newly freed African Americans in the South, it's this moment of incredible hope, but also just terrifying uncertainty. The future is a complete blank slate. And two people, both born into slavery, are going to try to write that future, but in completely different ways. Their stories start in different worlds, but believe me, they are connected.
For a young Booker T. Washington who was stuck working in a West Virginia coal mine, the way forward was crystal clear: education. You got to understand, the dream of this school called Hampton wasn't just some casual wish. He said it was a fire. This ambition that was with him day and night, burning away the darkness of his past and lighting up the only path he could see.
So this personal quest of his to get to that school, it became this epic journey. It really stands for the massive hope of an entire generation. But it also shows you the incredible, almost impossible odds they were facing the second they even tried to step toward freedom.
What's so amazing about this timeline is how one thing just leads to the next. It all kicks off with just a rumor he overhears in a mine about a school. That little bit of hope is enough to make him take a job with this super strict woman, Mrs. Ruffner, where he learns all about discipline. And then bam, it's 1872, he's got almost no money, and he sets off on a 500-mile walk, showing up with just 50 cents in his pocket. Insane.
And let me tell you, this journey was brutal. At one point, he gets stuck in Richmond, Virginia, totally broke. He's exhausted, he's starving, he doesn't know a soul. So what does he do? He finds a raised sidewalk and just sleeps on the dirt underneath it, with people walking over his head all night. And yet, he later wrote that he was everything but discouraged. The willpower is just, wow.
So when he finally gets to Hampton, the head teacher, she's not so sure about him. She decides to give him a test, not with a pen and paper, but with a broom. She tells him to sweep a classroom, and he does. He sweeps it 3 times, then he dusts it 4 times. The teacher comes back in, takes out her white handkerchief and wipes it over the furniture, and she can't find a single speck of dust. She just looks at him and says, "I guess you will do to enter this institution." For Washington, that right there was the most important exam he ever took.
Okay, so as incredible as Washington's story is, we have to remember the terrifying backdrop for all of this. While he was fighting tooth and nail to build a future, so many others were having their futures stolen from them in the most brutal way imaginable. And this is where the journalist Ida B. Wells comes in. You absolutely cannot understand this era without her.
2,000. Just let that number sink in. That's how many men, women, and children Ida B. Wells documented as being lynched in just the last 15 years of the 19th century. We're talking shot, hanged, even burned alive, all without ever getting their day in court. She was absolutely determined to uncover the real story behind this number.
You see, for Wells, these weren't just random, terrible acts. She called lynching America's national crime. Think about how powerful that phrasing is. She was calling the whole country out, arguing this was a systemic problem, a total breakdown of the law that the nation was just refusing to deal with. So Wells basically argued that the entire public conversation about lynching was poisoned by a lie. She pointed out that 99% of the editorials she read, even from people who meant well, started from what she called a baseless assumption, an idea that no one ever bothered to question. So what was this big lie?
Well, it was the public excuse that everyone used for lynching. And Ida B. Wells decided she wasn't going to fight it with just emotion. She was going to fight it with something much more powerful: cold, hard data. She became an investigative journalist, and she used the mob's own words against them to expose the truth.
So Wells did the work. She went through thousands of articles, and what she found was just stunning. As you can see here, pretty much every single article, every discussion accepted the same false story, that lynching was a justifiable reaction to assaults on white women. This one narrative just completely took over, squeezing out any other possible explanation.
And this is the name she gave it: the threadbare lie.
It was this idea you heard everywhere, from newspapers to church pulpits, that mob violence was the only way for white men to protect their women from black men. Wells set out to prove, with facts, that this whole story was a fraud.
So how did she prove it was a fraud? She used data from newspapers like the Chicago Tribune, which actually recorded the reasons mobs gave for these murders. And the reasons she found were just beyond belief. People were lynched for things that weren't even crimes, like having a bad reputation or being unpopular. For misdemeanors like violating a contract. And for reasons that are just plain bizarre, like frightening a child by shooting at rabbits. And this, right here, is the statistical knockout punch. Her data proved the threadbare lie was, well, a lie. In the last few years of the century, the one crime that was used to justify all this violence, it accounted for less than 16% of the lynchings. That means about 4/5 of the people murdered by mobs weren't even accused of assault. But Wells knew numbers alone weren't enough. People needed to see the faces behind the statistics. So she used individual stories to show the deep, rotting hypocrisy at the heart of the Southern justice system.
Just take a look at this case from Nashville, Tennessee. On the left, you have Pat Hanafan, a white man who sexually assaulted a little black girl. His punishment? A whole 6 months in jail. And after he got out, he became a city detective. On the right, you have Eef Gazard, a black man who was just charged with visiting a white woman. A mob dragged him out of his jail cell and lynched him in the street.
Wells just laid the hypocrisy out there for everyone to see. The laws she wrote left white men totally free to pursue black women, but it was an automatic death sentence for a black man to even be involved with a white woman, even if she wanted the relationship. It was never about protecting virtue, it was about power and control.
So, okay, let's step back. You've got these two giants, Washington and Wells. On the surface, it looks like they're on completely different tracks, right? One is all about building up from the inside, and the other is about tearing down a system of lies. But really, they were just fighting on two different fronts in the exact same war.
Booker T. Washington's weapon was a broom. It symbolized his belief in hard work, discipline, and basically proving your value to an unfair world. Ida B. Wells's weapon was a pen. It symbolized her belief that the truth, especially truth backed by hard data, could expose that same unfairness and get the world to finally do something about it. Both of these strategies were absolutely essential forms of resistance.
And all this leaves us with a really powerful question, one that we are still grappling with today. When you're up against some deep systemic injustice, what do? Is it better to focus on building yourself and your community up from within, or do you need to directly attack and try to tear down the oppressive system itself? And maybe the real question is, can you ever truly have one without the other?